Class of '64, Thomas Sung, you are a formidable man to be taken very seriously. I know this because you have a wife and 4 remarkable daughters, and you live at home. So it's just, already I start off being very impressed. I have an introduction that's been written here about you, and it really is remarkable. But what I'd really like to do is just sort of jump right in and get to know you a little bit. Tonight, the program is about Abacus, Small Enough to Jail, and for which was the subject of a Academy Award-nominated documentary, and it's really a compelling story, and I've seen it, and I'll tell you, it was disturbing, to say the least. And also, it made me proud of one of our graduates, for being such an important part of the community in a sort of It's a Wonderful Life kind of way. We all remember that movie. We'll see it 20 times every Christmas, right? But also somebody who was able, after being successful in different areas, to stand by their guns and successfully defend themselves with the help of your remarkable daughters and others. And I think it's also significant. I was trying to imagine that if my bank was accused of wrongdoing, whether Marla and I or others in the community would sort of rise up in support. And I think that it's a great tribute to you and your family and your employees, with one exception, to really have engendered that kind of really quite remarkable support, and at a time of acute financial concern. So let me find out. I mean, how did you get to be Thomas Sung? I mean, where were you born, and how did you get here to the States? And talk about your early education in life a little bit.
Sure. Thank you, Dean. May I just acknowledge and thank you for, and also Catalina Monk, Harold O'Grady, for putting this event together. We really appreciate it. My daughter and myself, we are honored to be here, and thank you all so very much for attending this event. This documentary film is kind of we intended to have a documentary film because we never knew what kind of outcome in the trial, as you know, Gene, with the jury trial, and where you have a DA who has all the power, the resources. And
okay, so you're such a modest man. Tell us about your start.
Okay, all right.
Okay, will you 3 help me out, please? We've got Jill, Vera, and Chanterelle here. They're up here. If he wanders off, will you keep him back on track?
I may, in fact, ask them to help out because I'm reaching the point where I do lose memory occasionally. So you would have to forgive me. But anyway, I started off as an immigrant, as you know, in 1952. Came over here, ended up in Ellis Island for 3 months. At the time when I came in, there was a law called the Chinese Exclusion Act, and the legal name is the Warren-McCarran Act, whereby Chinese are not welcome in this country. The total number of people that can be admitted in a country of over 1 billion is 101. So practically
101.
101, yes.
How many people are there in China?
Over 1 billion, 300 million.
Pretty tough odds.
Yes, that's a small number to say. But anyway,
you were from Shanghai.
I was born in Shanghai, but actually raised in Chongqing during the Second World War, and this goes back further than most people here would remember.
So Chongqing, wasn't that the Chinese capital
It
during
was
the Japanese
it,
occupation of China?
it was the capital during the Second World War, and and Chiang Kai-shek was then the resistant group to the Japanese, and retreated to Chongqing. That's a mountainous area where the Japanese could not easily invade. But nevertheless, I could remember as a child how much bombing and effort that we have to avoid being victim during the Second World War.
You were a teenager.
I was young, yes, I was a teenager, exactly. And I remember one incident, which I should not take time of everybody. There were 3 air shelters. They are natural area where people go in to avoid the bombing. And the Japanese somehow was able to drop 3 bombs in the 3 shelters right in the entrance, as a result of which thousands of people suffocated. And that was a big event, terrible event. But anyway, we were glad that the war was over. When the war was over, and thanks to the United States, incidentally, I should never forget, I remember they described the atom bomb as the size of a golf ball. And we all know that's not true. But after the second bomb was dropped, Japanese unconditionally surrendered. And I remember the entire village, all the firecrackers were gone. And I was jumping up and down, so heavy. And I was elated, almost feel like flying in the air. That was how wonderful that experience was. And well, I know many people consider dropping of the atomic bomb was not appropriate, maybe not, but at the time, the amount of stress
ended the war.
Yeah, ended the war, and we thought that was marvelous of this country, marvelous of the United States and Roosevelt. So I always had the love of this country.
So you arrived here 52?
In 1952, arrived, even though I was detained in Ellis Island, which you all know, in New York, for 3 months, hearing after hearing. But anyway, finally we were released, and ultimately we were obtained permanent resident status through the Refugee Relief Act. That was during the Eisenhower administration.
And you became a student, a law student in Florida. How did you get to Florida?
Well, no, I went to high school here 2 years and 3 years, and so I was just at the critical point. I did not totally learn Chinese well, and I was too old to learn English well. So you had to forgive me.
So you went to Hebrew school.
I speak like Yiddish, but I'm really not.
Okay. All right. So you did get your college degree, and where did you? In what
Yeah.
field?
So we went to Florida, Gainesville, Florida, because at that time 5 of us were in the college age. My father thought that was a pretty big bill to pay, and you got to find a place that you can go to school in a reasonable fashion, and that was very far sight of him. So I went to University of Florida. I received my degree in agricultural economics, both bachelor and master degree, and then I continued my study in finance. And yeah.
Did you plan to use that agricultural economics degree in Brooklyn?
Well, yes or no. I find all the educational background that I received was a true gift. Of course, needless to say, with the law school, I say that this country is supposed to be a country of law, supposed to be, and many people would agree. And with the incident that we had, maybe some will not agree. But anyway, we should strive to the point to say that law should be our, justice should be our motto in this
And
country.
you believe that. So you graduated from 1964 from Brooklyn Law School.
At night, yes, I went to law school at night, so I had very little contact in terms of social with the Brooklyn
You
Law
were
School.
working during the day.
Working full-time during the day. In 4 years at Brooklyn Law School, thank God for Brooklyn Law School. You provided the evening program that people can attend law school at night. That's not that easy, and the tuition was affordable. And while we're going to
Don't look
work.
at me when you say that.
Yeah, you are here to make it affordable.
Well, we can with big scholarships, you know. So, were you married at this point?
Yes, I was married. After 2 years in law school, I couldn't wait any longer. I thought, so I had to get married. I did get married, and then 2 years later, I graduated from the law school, and I had a very excellent job in the financial field, dean. But I decided that that I should give the law a try,
And you went to Chinatown and practiced law.
I didn't immediately. I went to join a firm which was the first law firm to become bankrupt, Finley, Cumbo, Miller. I don't know if you remember that.
No, I know Finley Cumble.
You know you did?
Right.
Leon Finley was the...
Right,
yeah,
right.
yeah,
They signed up all those high-powered folks.
Yeah.
I remember the former Nevada senator being one of the last people to sign up. They were getting everybody former governors.
Yes, yes.
And he was Ronald Reagan's best friend. Who was it? Paul Laxalt. So Laxalt signed up and then went bankrupt, so he immediately had this huge liability, which it took him the rest of his life to pay off.
Exactly, yeah, it was unbelievable. But I did practice with that law firm for 6 months. And in that firm, I should tell you this, and you would have a laugh, it was small then. It was about 7 or 8 lawyers. Everyone were, of course, non-Chinese. They were all Jewish. And they said to me that you need to change your name from Sun to Shapiro.
Do you think that would have fooled anybody? That's amazing.
I surely would have made a best try anyway. So
Talk about chutzpah.
yeah, that's a lot of chutzpah, that's for sure. But anyway, so I decided that I would come to the Chinese community to see if I could be of help. And one of the questions we'll touch upon that later on, sort of made me feel that I should serve the Chinese community. And for 20 years, I did work as a lawyer in the Chinese community.
Your own firm, right?
Yes, yeah, that's right. And I was so, Dean, I was so busy, you would be proud of me.
I am proud of you. What kind of work did you do? Everything? Or real estate?
Yes, yeah, everything, but most importantly, they needed was because of the Chinese Exclusion Act, many families were separate apart from each other, and I had my first case, the wife was separate from the husband for 20-some years, and they still remain faithful. Would you believe that?
No.
No.
Sure, yes, there's my wife right there. So.
Yes.
Yes. I meant yes.
Dean has much more chutzpah than I would not say that.
So this is a very successful practice. How many people in your firm?
Well, I did not take on any partner, but I was working. I could work, I said, 7 days a week, 24 hours a week. I would still have people waiting online to see me. So I was burned out. I said to myself, I have to do something, not just for 1 or 2 clients at a time. I need to do something for the community. And that's how I started the bank.
Great.
Yeah.
And so you went into, by the way, you had children at some point.
Yes, the children
You weren't at work all the time.
No, the children sort of come naturally. I don't know how they.
I'll tell you afterwards how it works. All right, back to the bank.
Okay.
So you had the idea of having a bank serving the Chinese community in Chinatown.
Yes.
And so, talk about, did you have any background? You had finance studies and so on.
Yes, I had finance, I had accounting, and of course the legal background helped. I decided that I should be doing something, and I find there was a lack of financial services that would be catering to the immigrants who does not speak the language, and that's why I started the bank. And it's more or less on a well, people say, you say it's not for profit, but really prove it to me, you know. The only thing I can tell you is that I never receive a salary. Would you believe that? But anyway, for 20 years,
well, how did you
I mean,
live?
for 30 years. Well,
you never had a salary, but you moved up to Connecticut. You had 4 daughters.
Exactly.
You commuted. I assume you weren't stealing gas and siphoning it off.
Well,
how did you live?
How did I live? Well,
I want to find out.
Yes, that's right. I sort of decide that when I came in to the community, I saw the changing in the demographics, and I feel there was a need for real estate investment development. And through help of my family, and I started the first building that I owned was on 181 East Broadway, and I tell you, that was an interesting event. It was a fire-gutted building, you know, and I know the rent control, rent stabilization. I said, well, fire-gutted, let me buy that building. Before I went on vacation to Grand Bahama, and that was a very quick event. And I saw that building. I said to my wife, I said, I have to sign a contract for that building before I leave, and I did. Almost sight unseen, but I saw this, but I know it was terrible condition. It was fire totally gutted. I bought the building.
Did she look at it? Wei Lin?
No. She never looked at it. She just said, "You're crazy. You go."
She knew without having to look at it. Right.
Right. So I went to the local community before that, tried to borrow some money to go into real estate. It was very difficult. No bank would lend money. You know, that was a true fact to Chinese people. And then I complained to the New York banking department, and lo and behold, I went to the Manhattan Savings Bank. I said, here's the situation. I need some money to renovate the building. Would you know, they calculated on their calculator. We don't do that today.
You use an Abacus.
Yeah, we use the Abacus. We use Abacus today, and that's much more accurate. And I remember they gave me $220,000 to renovate 22 apartments. I said, well, how did you come up with that figure? He said, well, we calculate based on that 22 apartments that you're going to renovate, the income would support this no problem. And I renovated this building, finished the construction for $180,000. I have $40,000 left. I paid off the existing loan on the thing. I had a negative investment. That's how I made my money, and that's how I devoted time. It's a long story, sure.
That's not a long story. Well, the bank grew very fast, and pretty soon you were cultivating getting your daughters involved.
Well, yes, but I always know that if you insist on having your daughters involved when they are not willing to be involved, it is not a good idea, because they will always veer off, right? So I said to them, let's you all go try on your own for 2 years, and then after 2 years working outside, you can then make a decision.
Oh, so they started elsewhere?
Every one of them went to work for Vera, the oldest daughter, went to the Brooklyn DA's office for 2 years, and the Joe Hines, And Jill worked for Structure Levin for 2 years as a corporate lawyer. And Chantal, of course, worked for the DA's office in the public service for upwards of 12 years, isn't it?
11,
Yeah, 11, yeah, not totally in DA. And I have one more daughter I must not forget, because somehow or another words will get out if I forget her. She decided that she does not want to participate, have anything to do with law with us. So she became a medical doctor. So I have 4 daughters.
So doctors and lawyers, maybe you are Jewish. I don't know.
I'm happy to report to you that I'm number 6 in the family, because first the mother, then the 4 daughters, and then finally become me, right? And then by the time you get to me, anything I say will be held against me.
I think it was very prescient for you, given what we're about to talk to when we make the turn here, to have 3 daughters in law, especially with experience with the district attorney's office. But I also think, more seriously, it'll be interesting to getting your perspectives, given your experience, on what happened and whether or not you thought that was out of the ordinary or exceptional. So, which is really, I think, part of the clip we have. I saw some of those comments, and it's very telling. So we have a clip here. I do want to get this really big audience a chance to talk and ask you things, but let's talk a little bit about. Well, actually, I want to tell you. I want to mention 2 things before we start talking about the case and the clip about your law school. You may
Yes.
or may not know them. So first, Brooklyn Law School is a unique institution. It's a very special place, and we have with our special mission, we have special responsibilities. One of the things is we've always been inclusive, always. And you may not know this, but from the earliest days, 1901, when we opened up, we took students from China. And it was a time, as you know, of great hostility to immigrants, and particularly to Chinese immigrants. And there were laws in the books in many states that prohibited Chinese people from studying law, becoming lawyers. Why? Well, the law, even when you are dealt an injustice, the law is the tool to obtain justice and to obtain your civil rights and so on. Mm-hmm. And that's part of it. And so the Brooklyn Law School faculty went to Albany and lobbied and got an amendment to the statute at the time so that people from China were able to apply to Brooklyn Law School, and if they got a degree from this law school, they were able to practice. And so I think that's a neat story. From our earliest days, you can see pictures, class pictures have women, blacks. It's not quite as easy to pick back out, but Irish and Italian, who also weren't necessarily, going to law school in high numbers. And we had Chinese, among others. We had Asians. And the earliest Chinese were mainly, as far as I know, and Oxford scholar is studying this, were people of privilege from China. So it wasn't that they had immigrated and worked on the railroad or had some other trade or something. They were very privileged, well-off families that sent them here. And some stayed and practiced. Some went back immediately, but all eventually returned to China. And do you know, as far as I know, what every single one of them did when they returned? They became diplomats.
Uh-huh.
So when you think about it, it kind of makes sense, and so that's it. So
Wonderful.
The other thing is, I just to tell you the bookend of this, and forgive me for taking this time, but I want you to give some context of your law school here. Next week I'll be in China. And then the following month I'll be in China again. The following month we'll be taking our 30 or 40 students to Beijing. We always have a program in the summer. It's a marvelous experience. Some are Chinese heritage people, most are not. And this is the world that we live in, which is global. I'm very proud of that. But I'll be there next week visiting many of the top universities and law schools and universities who are going to be looking at our school. We have been on the approved list of the best universities, best law schools in the United States, and we're very proud. The General Counsel of the Silk Road and Belt Fund, you've heard of that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
Hannah Cow, class of 2004, Brooklyn Law School. She's the general counsel, young woman.
2004.
And
Wow.
Thomson Reuters has just voted her as one of the best in-house counsels in China. Not Bayonne, China, you know. So I think I'm very proud of that. And we just recognized her as our alumna of the year, as you know, one of our alumni of the years. And she's just terrific. We'll be visiting her. So now back to the topic. You know, Marla says that if I ever wrote an autobiography, the title would be, I Digress.
That's,
So forgive me, okay? Forgive me. I thought that was a pretty good story.
Dean, you could do whatever you want.
So you have any grandchildren applying?
Yes, I do. I have 4, and I contributed my quota.
Okay. Well, I would love to see their applications to this great law school.
Thank you. Incidentally, when you do go to China, this documentary film has been reviewed and accepted by the Chinese Central TV station, by the official party newspaper, which is the People's Journal, and it's all over China. And if you do mention that you were the dean of Brooklyn Law School, where this guy, Thompson, attended, you will be held in forever high esteem.
I'm used to that.
Yes?
No, I'll take you up on that.
Yes, tell them that.
Never been done it, you know, I'm not used to doing that. That's fantastic, okay. So, turning to the business at hand here. So, the case that we're talking about tonight originated in 2009 when Vera, right here, Vera, acting as an attorney for the bank, discovered during a routine closing that one loan officer was colluding with the borrower to commit mortgage fraud. Now, what did Vera do? Did you cover it up? Did you cook the books? Did you split the take with the corrupt? No, loan officer, what did you do? Jill, the president of Abacus, promptly fired the loan officer the very next business day, and the bank immediately launched an internal investigation and reported the incident to law enforcement, its regulators, and to Fannie Mae. Okay? Pretty much like squeaky clean above the board. After being denied the loan for the closing, the borrower then filed a complaint against the loan officer and Abacus, and the district attorney decided to charge the bank. The case lasted almost 5.5 years. There was 5 years of an investigation making the case, and then the trial itself lasted more than 5 months. The jury deliberation was 10 days, and the bank was acquitted of all 240 counts. So when we turn to this clip, we're going to see from acclaimed director Stephen James. Again, I said it was an Academy Award-winning nominated documentary titled Abacus Small Enough to Jail. And it tells the saga of the Sung family, owners of the Abacus Federal Savings of Chinatown, who had been accused of mortgage fraud, and the indictment and the trial forces the Sung family used to defend themselves and their bank's legacy in the Chinese community over the course of this 5.5-year battle. And the images, to me, are stunning in terms of the treatment that was received. And I think that it was an incredibly painful experience. Nobody in your position can ever be made completely whole, but you should feel very good about not only your family and community supporting you, but getting complete vindication in the outcome. So well done. Can we just start the clip?
I told Mr. Song, I'm glad they pick on you because you're a fighter.
Cyrus Vance just felt this is easier to attack, especially it's a family bank. But he doesn't realize Tom is not easy to be pushed around. And my girls, They're tough, smart, capable women, so courageous.
Although this is David versus Goliath, David, being Abacus Federal Savings Bank, has a slingshot. And that is, their whole family of lawyers.
I was going to be able to fight this.
They're almost gleeful. They're like, we're going to have our day in court now. We're actually going to be able to show that they were wrong.
They made a decision that they were not going to plead guilty to something that they didn't feel the bank was guilty of. That is a courageous choice, and it's an expensive choice. The DA's office has hundreds of lawyers and took 5 years to do their grand jury investigations, and it is a daunting task to fight the government.
这个事情呢，是我们跟这个不能接受他的这个判断。
What was especially interesting was the way the DA pursued the public relations aspect of this prosecution. Reporters in this town were treated to this extraordinary photo opportunity, this almost Stalinist-looking chain gang.
I'm a former prosecutor, I'm not soft on crime. I've never seen a spectacle like this. These people were humiliated intentionally for no good reason.
It is not the district attorney's office's decision whether or not to put people in handcuffs, but people who are brought into court who have been charged with crimes are put into handcuffs. That's a decision that's made by the court officers. I won't go into it more than that because, it's not something I'm involved with.
Court officers don't come outside of the courtroom. They were led down the hallway by district attorney investigators. I got off the elevator and I saw what was happening. I had never seen that in my entire time at the DA's office. I mean, this was like the case of the century.
He never would have done that with a black group of employees. Everyone would see that for what it was. And they actually staged it so much so that 3 of the people that were in that chain had already been arraigned, had already posted bond, and were out awaiting trial.
The DA had added charges to Mr. Wong's indictment. Usually, you don't even have to go through the process again. They just add the charges, you get arraigned again, the bail is transferred, and that's that. Instead, they had me turn him in, and next thing you know, I see him chained to 15 other people being herded like cattle down the hallways of 100 Center Street. I've been doing this for 25 years, and I'd never seen that happen before.
I'm sure there are security issues behind the decision, but those decisions can also have implications and create feelings that don't reflect the view of the office or my view, and to the degree that happened here, I think it was very unfortunate, but it happened.
To this day, I think this is right. There haven't been any prosecutions against any other financial...
Not criminal prosecution.
Not a criminal
no.
prosecution, okay. Why you?
Well, there is a reason for it, and I saw that from the very beginning when they insist on the bank be prosecuted. The DA of Manhattan is very unique in the sense that Manhattan is the home of all the largest bank in the world, and therefore he has jurisdiction over these banks, domestic and foreign. Now, because of this unique situation, when a bank committed a wrong in 2008, of course, the financial crisis, that many banks committed wrong, which was reviewed in the congressional record, and we as a bank had nothing to do with it. As a matter of fact, I always say that we contributed to the recovery of the financial crisis. But I believe that from the very beginning, that he wanted to have this bank, small bank, to fail. And the reason he selected this bank is because it would be least consequential to him in terms of any political repercussion, because Chinese, unfortunately, for all you Chinese student and lawyer-to-be and lawyers, are very, in a sense, civically passive, in the sense that you do not take an active role in participating in political elections. So the political consequences were small. So his purpose, based upon our study, is that no bank survives in indictment, historically, no bank. And he was thinking that by indicting the bank would fail, and then he would then go after the big banks based upon the records and ask them to settle their cases, potential cases that he could bring as a DA. So that
that's a very interesting twist. So
no,
you
that
thought
is
it was part of his calculation. I had thought there would be also a more simplistic idea in that you were chosen maybe first, you're saying, not as the only, but first, because the office underestimated you and felt that you would plead guilty or accept the deal.
No, he wants you to plead guilty to a felony, not a misdemeanor, and also accept a fine. But that's not what he wanted. He wanted you to plead a major crime, so by doing so, you would fail.
Interesting.
And the real calculated reason, as I foresaw at that time, was that he wanted to go after for a lot more money. And after the case was over, the reporter asked him how much fine that he has already collected from the financial institutions. You will be astounded to know that he has already, at that time, $808 million. And I said over and again that if Abacus failed, he would become a $2 billion DA for sure. So accusing us for money and greed is in fact a reflection of himself. That is how terrible this is. And that's why I say you lawyers and lawyers-to-be really need to recognize our system needs to be reformed, that we cannot create a situation where one man can control this type of resources without third-party supervision. You know, even Hillary Foundation, now today they're talking about that. Now, she is subject to oversight, not the DA.
Well, of course, there is the ballot box.
Yeah, the ballot box. So that to answer your question, on the day when this film that you just saw was premiered in New York, in the Lincoln Center, he simultaneously announced in the same day that he is contributing $9 million of the money that he held to Better Women's Society and this and 3 other. Now, with this kind of power, how would you then to say make him be responsible for the deeds that he has committed?
Makes him very politically powerful and popular.
Extremely. Yeah. In the last election in November, the endorsement by Democrats was 7%, I believe, compared with the Manhattan borough president, 93% endorsement. And yet, DA was re-elected. How? Because no opposition. And people were concerned about the power that he has, and also the money power I'm talking about, right? And also the fact that he has distributed so much money now, and he has, after the case, And I say people should thank us, the not-for-profit organization, for having gone through this experience, because it's down now to from 808 million down to 730-some million dollars. That was just recently reported in the Village Voice and in the Post.
So you're suggesting a very interesting point, that there should be reform of the use of the money, so that there's oversight, maybe that it's independent from a political person.
Exactly.
I mean, if somebody has to pay a fine,
you pay a fine, but
that the actual money then go
to the state.
It's the public's money.
It's public money. It should go to the state, go to the city. But why should a man be able to control this money, spend as he saw fit, except of course openly for himself? Now, when you have this type of situation, when he committed error in his judgment to the extent that he did, as without mentioning Harvey Weinstein or the other cases and so forth, and he is still
Harvey Weinstein.
and still re-elected. Now, isn't that horrifying to you? I would say it's horrifying, and that's why I say, for you people, you need to interest your legislator to have legislation passed. And I don't know of any a law enforcement office duly elected by the people to enforce law to administer justice will become a profit entity, for-profit entity.
It also arguably creates a conflict of interest if they're settling cases based on the payment that's going to come into the office.
Yes.
It's a very, very interesting point that bears, I think, a lot of study. Let's shift gears very quickly, and then we'll open this up to the floor. Talking about the trial, you chose a jury trial.
Yes,
right?
yes, we
but
did.
But yet, that's pretty risky, isn't it? You must have been concerned about that.
Yeah.
I mean, you knew you were right. You, in your heart, I'm not putting words in your mouth.
Right.
You felt that you were absolutely right and that you had done nothing illegal.
Right.
All right?
Yeah.
So you put yourself in the hands of a jury when
That's
you
right.
knew you were right.
Right.
As opposed to asking a judge to be the trier of fact.
That's right.
So why did you make that decision, and how did it feel waiting for the jury to come back?
Well, it certainly was very tense moments waiting for the jury to come in. Of course, 4 out of the 12 held up for a not guilty decision for quite a few days, but ultimately they came around and voted for not guilty. We feel in the beginning that our lawyers feel that it has to be a jury trial because you don't know the judge that you selected. The first judge that we had was quite pro-prosecution, and there was a book just written about first chapter. The book name is called The Divide by Matthew Taibbi, and The Divide illustrates the system in our system that the rich, the powerful, gets the justice, and the small, the poor, the weak get the axe. And the first chapter wrote about this case, and at that time the judge was presiding over this particular case, and later on this judge resigned. Retired. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Great defamation lawyers. It's fantastic. Very good. 3 lawyers on cue.
I tell you, maybe I should not say anything.
No. All right. So now, what was it? How long? It took the jury 10 days. What was it like? Were you anxious?
Well, of course.
Was he anxious? Really? He wasn't.
Well, because that's one good reason why we should have a documentary, because you go for a court of law, there's always an unknown factor involved. But we thought having a court of public opinion was important, and that's why we allowed this documentary film to be had. And we started the institution, that much that I can say they don't know as well as I do. I started the institution not for profit reasons, because we say we want to serve the community. We always say, if it is not good for the community, we don't do. If it's good for the community and good for the bank, of course we would do. But if you get to the point where the bank becomes really fairly substantial and strong, then even if it is not good for the bank, but good for the community, we should do. And that moment arose when we were indicted. So I had no problem in letting,
And so you
spend all
put
of
your
it.
hands in 12 people and confident and hopeful that justice would finally be done.
We were certainly hopeful. I always held the feeling that if your heart is in the right place, then good things should come to you. If it does not, then it's God's will.
Well, it's no small thing. I mean, when you think of a 240 count indictment and not have one of them, you think sometimes a jury, very complicated facts, they might find on some counts. The fact that you just had complete exoneration is quite remarkable. And from your story and what we've heard, I can't help but sit here and think we have a real-life Bedford Falls. And instead of Jimmy Stewart playing, the fellow that never quite gets out of Bedford Falls to have his own life, we have Thomas Sung and his wonderful family. So thank you all. Thank you and thank you for this. But I'm going to... While you're thinking of your questions, I'm going to put our president of APALSA on the spot, Richard Swee, and you let him ask a question.
Good evening, Mr. Sun. Thank you so much for coming today and joining us with the discussion. So today, my question for you builds on the comparison between the civil rights movement in the 60s and the social and political situations nowadays. I recall that you graduated from Brooklyn Law School in 1964, and it was in that year where this nation witnessed the enactment of the groundbreaking Civil Rights Act of 1964. Currently, under the Trump administration, we've seen many social issues, especially those related to civil rights, have returned under the social spotlight. As a law school student, I can't help but make the connections between the two eras given their similarities. So I'm wondering, as a law student and a witness of the civil rights movement in the 60s, what would be your advice to the current law students faced with the current situations who would like to get more engaged in those situations? Thank you.
Yes, that's a very good question. When I started in '64, even a little bit earlier before that time, it was just the time when the civil rights movement was at its peak. And I saw the great leaders of civil rights movement, without everyone would know, Dr. Martin Luther King and so forth. One of the things that inspired us to want to dedicate ourselves to do something for the good of the community is the fact that I saw Dr. King had a cause. He had a purpose in life. And so much so, we were envious that he was able and he was willing to give his life for it. And for that, he inspired me that we should also do something for our community. Now, you young people who are lawyers and lawyers-to-be should take every opportunity to use your education and your experience to find a worthy cause, not so much as for yourself in making money, but for the good of the whole community. And in that respect, from that point of view, you will be greatly rewarded, and you will find yourself at peace, even under most unusual circumstances as we have gone through today.
So he was at peace. That's beautiful. I mean, that's really a perspective and a philosophy that is just tremendous if people can emulate that. Is there a Chinese word for the word civility or something? Is there a Chinese word for civility?
I have to say that being an ancient culture for so many thousands of years, there must be some words, but I can't think of anything immediately that's comparable because I lived here for so long.
Well, I'm sure there is. The reason I raise that in response to Richard's question is that civility has come to mean good manners, being polite, but the actual Latin, which we all lawyers use, the Latin root is civis. And really what it means is to be a citizen. And so civility is the act of being a good citizen. And good citizen means that you lead a life like yours of responsible, caring conduct that's for the benefit not just of yourself, but of the entire community. And so there's a connection, and it's a principle in law that we've kind of gotten away from. But that's really the answer is, as you said, but your education is not just for yourself. And as a lawyer, you bear a higher responsibility. You have both private and public responsibilities. And so your education will benefit you and your entire family, but it's also to be used as a lawyer for the benefit of the entire public. So that's my best swipe. Not that you needed any help. I should have just shut up and let your beautiful...
No, thank you, Dean.
Are there any other questions? Here's one right here. There's a microphone coming.
I haven't yet seen a documentary. I'm going to try to see it tonight. I did listen to a podcast that I think either the director or a producer was on a show recently. But my question really is I guess, more for your daughters, who, if I recall, 2 of the 3 worked in the district attorney's office at one point. I don't know if there's a New York district attorney or another, but I guess what I'm wondering, without knowing all the facts in the case, it sounds on the face of it that there was this tremendous injustice done. There were political reasons or whatnot why the district attorney brought the case and stayed with it. I'm wondering, for your daughters who worked in the district attorney's office, if this was a kind of, if this was a sui generis situation for whatever circumstances were involved here, or was this the kind of thing that you had seen in other manners, and how this has shaped your perspective of the justice system? I mean, maybe less so the justice system and more so the prosecutorial aspect of it. You ended up getting exonerated, but just the fact that you had to go through this nightmare, I'm just wondering what
Let's
your
get them
view
a
was.
microphone so they can answer.
Hi, so I'm Chantarelle, and I did work at the Manhattan DA's office for 7 years. And I will say that when this whole experience happened and I found out that the DA's office was starting this investigation, and then I began to see how they proceeded with it, it was highly unusual to me, from my perspective. I feel that I have learned and I was trained by the best in that office, and it had such a great reputation at the time. And this is really such a shame that this happened. And I worry because I'm afraid that what happened in this case now might be more of something that is less unusual and more commonplace, which is why we need to, there's a lot of work to be done. In terms of, the transition between Morgenthau and Cy Vance, one thing I had noticed, because in 2010 when Vance took appointment, that was right when the case started, the investigation started. I had noticed there was a marked change in terms of the focus on optics and what the media would perceive the office as doing, and that becomes very dangerous when you're in a position as a prosecutor of evaluating the facts and the evidence. You never want to be influenced by external factors. So I did see a lot of that happening. The other comment I would make is that through my entire career in the law enforcement arena, unfortunately, I think that racism, whether it's in the form of subconscious bias, unconscious bias, or overt bias, it really does exist. And we don't like to think it does, but it does. And my family and I experienced that firsthand throughout this entire case. There are numerous examples. I mean, the most, I think, obvious and upsetting one perhaps is the chain gang. But there were many other instances where we felt that. And I think, unfortunately, that is a weakness and we as the public, as the people in these positions of authority and discretion, we need to really be careful that we don't let that type of that subconscious bias color our interpretation of the facts, because I have seen that happen.
Had any member of any one of the defendants who were chained, had any one of them ever had any even allegation of a violent act? Anybody, would you like to comment? Would you?
There were women, most women and older women. One of the ones that was chained in the front was a 65-year-old woman, a grandmother. And we actually had, during the discovery process, got a copy of the tape where she was interrogated by the DA office investigator, and she was pressured with tremendous pressure. He threatened her immigration status. He threatened that she wouldn't be able to see her grandchildren if she didn't basically say what he wanted her to say. And she was tough. She held out. She didn't say because it was not true. But the amount of pressure tactics were quite strong in this situation.
Yeah, and just in terms of the chain gang, I actually, at the time I was no longer working at the DA's office, but I had gone to the arraignment to see it. And that was what was extremely shocking, because I had gotten off the elevator and there's a long hallway that leads to the courtroom. And you could see that the office had already prepared for this press opportunity. There were like fences staged along the hallway, and then the press were standing behind there. So it was really staged
like a shoot
for a press
for
opportunity.
cattle
It
going
was,
into the slaughter.
right, and then the reporters and photographers were all there, and that was, we were only informed the day before in the afternoon that the arraignment was to take place. After several years of investigation and grand jury indictment, we were told that the day before, and then there was this press conference that was arranged at 10 a.m. that morning. So this is why, it wasn't security, and the district attorney investigators were the ones who came out to escort the individuals down the hallway, but it was optics. I mean, one of the
I'm sorry.
Oh,
go
that's
ahead.
okay,
No,
Dean.
no, go ahead, please.
I was watching the clip again today. It's actually a very upsetting to watch that chain gang, but I always notice things more and more as I see it again and again. And one of the things that I notice are how the detective investigators were actually dressed up. I don't know if you noticed, one had a bow tie on. I mean, they were clearly dressed up, and they knew that
that they were going to be, you know, on, that they were
page
going to be
of the Post,
photographed and staged, and that just really makes me so angry. As a prosecutor, I've never seen nonviolent criminals being chained together like that. And I don't want to spoil, you're going to watch the film, but as a prosecutor, and I have our lawyers who are here, was Rob Friedman, who was our defense counsel, part of our defense counsel. We worked together in the Brooklyn District Attorney's Office. I was hired under Charles Hines, and I was so proud of being a prosecutor and taking jobs so seriously, and basically knew and understood that we were here, that people who were charged were innocent until proven guilty. And you will see what the chief of economic crime says in the film later on, which will just rip you up inside, where she clearly doesn't understand that. It is one thing that we all, as prosecutors, understood. You are innocent until proven guilty, and we have to be held to that burden.
Any of our students have a question? Any of our students here? Anyone? You're an awfully mature student.
I was wondering collectively if you all think that the Attorney General's investigation of Cyrus Vance Jr., very junior, and the Weinstein episode will have any consequences for him and the office.
Well, as your attorney, I would ask you not to answer that question unless you really, really, really want to. But, you know, there's a big article in New York Magazine about it that goes on and on, featuring my law school. Actually, we were co-chairs of the Barristers Union together in law school. Martha Bashford, who's run the special victims unit for years. And I'm not sure if that's actually what it's called, but that's what I watch when I'm watching Law and Order. Yeah. So I think there's an impact, but we'll see. Anybody else have a question? Yes, sir, in the back.
Mr. Sung, I saw the documentary twice on Channel 13 and cried most through the whole documentary. All I want to say is that you're so humbly modest, and we thank you. I've worked beside many, in the 60s, many civil rights leaders, and was the right-hand person to a couple of the civil rights leaders. You are humbly delightful to our New York community.
Thank you. Thank
You know, unless you have any objection, I think that's a pretty good note to end on.